Alright, welcome back to another episode of Building 101. Today we are going to be talking about interiors, and that means talking about furniture. So to start with, I've got some tables laid out. This is your most basic Minecraft table. These are the kinds you'll find in villages, and that's just a pressure plate stuck on top of a fence post. Obviously that means you can make a couple of variations of that, 4 to be exact. And you can make larger ones that look a bit like a picnic table, if you like the separation. You can also use embedded pistons to do something similar. It's got a slightly different effect, and if I get myself a stairs to make a chair, you can make something like that. Those look fine, they're sort of a cafe style, but they're not what I prefer. I like to use upside down stairs to make more substantial tables. Now these ones, and of course you can do this with any block that allows for an upside down stair and a half slab, are your basic large coffee table type things. You can fit these in nicely. They can get a whole bunch of different widths and lengths. And certain blocks, the woods obviously, and I quite like, well, okay, in my case, I like to use the nether brick and the proper bricks to make different ones. The nether brick doesn't have a half slab, so it's difficult to make them too wide. But what you can do, if you want a more substantial sort of leg arrangement, is something like this, which is just, and I'll get some nether bricks in my inventory, upside down stairs to a certain degree, and then the opposite side on the side, and that gives you this nice sort of bracketed T shape. And that also means if you've got some actual nether brick, you can make it a bit wider by, let's see, taking off that, and that, and that, and that. Doing it like so. And you get a chunkier, but still table-ish looking thing. Now if you want chairs, your easiest thing is obviously going to be a stair. These are kind of your bread and butter way to make a Minecraft chair. Depending on where you want to put them, you generally want a gap all round. Oops. And you can put arms on them. And they basically work fine as little chairs. If you want to get more in depth with the chairs, you usually have to raise the floor itself. So you go up a half block, and then you can embed any block you want and make something that looks a little bit more chair-like, or at least more like a thing you could sit on. Generally speaking, anything that looks like it's a half a block tall looks like something you can sit on. Anything that looks like it's more than that looks too tall to be able to be sat on. So these are variations of these that kind of go backwards. You just gotta, yeah, that one's not going to work. We'll make one out of sandstone. You basically embed your stairs into the actual ground itself, and then use a half slab, whoops, to create the table. And then you can continue that around if you want different effects. Tables. And then really, if you just do that, you start to get something that looks like you could sit on it. I would obviously be better off using half slabs to do that. Of course, if you are using half slabs, then it is just as easy to make a bench-like surface on a flat ground. These raised ones, their best use is when you want to use something a bit different, like these logs that look like half logs that you can sit on. Can only be done if the ground is brought up half a block. Now personally, I find this style of table to be much more useful. It breaks things up nicer, and you get a lot more variation in the materials and patterns that you can do compared to these, which, though I quite like this one if you're doing an outside sort of a bench, the splits don't quite look right in my mind. Now the second most useful bit of furniture that I find is shelving units. I've got some set up over here. On this side, we have shelving units butted up against a one thick wall. You've got your basic shelving unit, and this is just a combination of upside down and right way up stairs and half slabs. You can make a variation of basic squares and rectangles using that. You can do the same thing and surround bookcases in various styles to make books seem a little bit more bookcasey. Here's your most basic kind of bookcase, which is just a bunch of books with trapdoors around it. It butts them in nicely and it frames them nicely. And then this one here, which is just a series of bookshelves with a series of shelves next to it. Once again, just stairs and half slabs. And obviously, bookshelves. Over here, the same thing, but we've got a too thick wall. What that lets us do is actually put another texture behind. In this case, I'm using a spruce wood. Now let's try and get this upside down again. Come on. This can be a bit of a pain. There we go. Spruce wood to create a bit of depth, but also make it look like there's a backing to the shelf. You can do the same thing by actually embedding the bookshelves into the wall. There we go. Once again, adds a nice little bit of depth, adds a nice little bit of pattern, does absolutely nothing of any use as far as the game is concerned, but aesthetically speaking, gives you some nice interesting shapes to work with. Probably the most important part about furniture when it comes to this kind of stuff is the fact that you've got to use the blocks that are less than 1 block thick. So anything like signs come in helpful, and here's another kind of bench setup. Once again, if you were to raise the floor a half slab, what looks like a wall table, oops, I'll have to replace those. Will look more like a seat. As soon as you make it not quite so high, it looks like it could be sat on. As it is, it looks more like a bench, a table. Once again, if you put sort of a chair system in front of it, you have something that looks vaguely table-ish. You can also make legs out of, what is that? That's iron bars. Fence posts will work too. Anything of the sort. We'll give you just another design that you can use for any kind of table, bench, or even seat. Now, one more thing that I am a fan of is used primarily to break a large room up into smaller subdivisions, and that is a hedge. slash potted plant type arrangement. I like to use these. Doesn't really matter what you're using, as long as it looks decent when you start to cover it up with a trapdoor. Depending on how you lay these out, depends on how many trapdoors you'll need, whether you surround it like that and make a complete unit or not. And then put some hedgeworks on top, and it gives a nice little bit of visual interest, as well as a... Give me 1 second to find what I'm after, which is going to be that. A way to grid off areas of a larger space. So if I can do one with my obsidian. Sort of same basic thing. What you want to use for the base is completely up to you. The important thing is more the slight depth that the trapdoor gives it. It's just enough to separate it in your mind as being something unique. So, those are what I find to be the 3 primary... Oh, one more thing, which is a couch, which is basically done using any wool. The smallest one you can get is actually quite large. Technically, as far as Minecraft is concerned, this would be a 3 meter wide by 2 meter wide chair. But as far as your eyes are concerned, it kind of works. You can basically do this with any combination of wool and half block. I tend to like to use the regular stone slabs. For some reason they look slightly more comfortable, despite the fact that they are clearly made of stone. And any combination of wool, which colour and etc. will depend entirely on the rest of the interior. So, we'll have a look at what it looks like all together. Alright, so here we have a cobbled together interior space. Quite simple, it's all using earthy tones, which is going to make an impact of what goes in there. But getting too deep into that starts to get into quite complicated colour theory type stuff, which is a bit harder to quickly do in a short video series, more like a university degree. Suffice to say that when you've got something that's all earthy tones like this, we've got the light sandstone and then the darkish woods and the lighter woods, you don't want to be filling it with greens and blues. Well, some blues, but warmer colours basically. Some greens, sorry. Blue's probably going to be hard to fit in there, but we're looking at the warmer side of things. If it was all made of cobblestone and stone bricks and stuff like that, you can start bringing in cooler shades like the blues and the greens. Now, when it comes to interiors, essentially what you're doing boils down to breaking up the spaces into smaller subcompartments. This one is somewhat done already, but lines such as carpeting will help that greatly. This one's a bit larger, so it's going to need some kind of separation. Again, going really basically, usually you want to look at something and break it up into approximately thirds. Or at least groups of 3. Groups of 3 are generally quite pleasing to the eye. If you ever look at a magazine layout, they often use 3 layers, 3 columns. And that kind of design theory works the same here. So we're basically going to have a feature on the walls. That'll be 1/3, 2/3, and a feature in the middle. And that'll break it up nicely into 3s. Up the back here, that's not going to be quite so possible, but we're still basically going to be having a look at a thing that'll go from 1 feature. So, let's get to decorating this place then. I said toggle. Thank you. So, here we go. a fully furnished room using essentially 3-4 basic ideas. We have the couches. We have a table. We have carpet, which I haven't actually gone into yet, but it's essentially just a good way of breaking up a larger space into smaller spaces, is to just carpet the floor in rectangular fashion. Whichever, anytime you put a rectangle in, it will start to look like its own contained unit. Whatever shape you make the carpet, you'll read that as a unit in itself. So if I was to bring this carpet out, for instance, I'll get some of that to replace it afterwards. Oh, I should need to be able to see what I'm doing here. If I was to bring that carpet out a bit, it would change which part you read. It changes what you read as a contained space. This now comes out further, which would allow us to then separate this bit off into another section, which is essentially the primary theory of any Minecraft interior. Gridding off certain sections so that they read as a cohesive area. So, to take a look at it as a whole, the first thing to consider is the colours. In this particular instance, I used wood, darker wood, and then my sandstone. So that's all very earthy colours. So I pretty much stuck with that as far as the insides go. I went for the warmer shade of things rather than cooler. There's not really much in the way of blues. The coolest it gets is a neutral grey. The reason that I used a neutral grey is because there was enough colour and warmth that making these any other warm colour, such as red or brown or even an orange, would have started to get a little bit too... it would have clashed. So I went for a nice neutral grey. You can generally fit a neutral grey in no matter what the rest of your interior looks like. Greys will always fit. They don't clash with anything. Over here we broke up the wall, which is actually too thick, with one of the bookshelves. We've lined the outer side of everything with the little hedges, which give it a nice sense of greenery and lighten the place up a bit. And implemented the couches and the chair, and made what I guess is a relaxation slash study room. Let's get some music. Now, over here, the same basic theory as the bookcase over here. This time using some note blocks which do absolutely nothing except look vaguely like speaker systems, and a jukebox. End result, what looks to be a nice, comfortable living room, reading room. Somewhere to come and relax with some music and a book. If I was able to place books on tables, I would. Soon I'll be able to place pot plants on tables, and that will change how you do things a little bit, but they're nice and versatile, so they're going to be fun to use. And as usual, just before we go, I will skip through a couple of texture packs, just to show that it all sort of works regardless of what the actual visual style of your Minecraft looks like. Next episode, I might go through some of the interior options when you're making more sort of specific rooms, like how to make a kitchen or whatever. But until then, that'll be it for today, Leave any feedback in the comments if you're finding it helpful at all. And until next time, happy building!